everybody. Welcome to episode 40 of Weighing In with Andy Hamilton and David Mirkitani. I'm Andy Hamilton, coming to you from the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum in downtown Waterloo, Iowa. Joined on the phone again by David Mirkitani, coming to you from St. Louis, or the outskirts of St. Louis, I should say. David,
the suburbs.
How's everything down south? How's everything in the St. Louis suburbs?
Everything's great, man. How are you doing?
Doing well. Doing great. Another lengthy list of things we can touch on in the wrestling world that has taken place here. News that has dropped in the last week. Isaiah Martinez has come out and said he's planning on staying at Illinois. Gavin Hoffman announced his commitment to Ohio State. Trent Paulson is headed to Virginia, going to join his twin brother Travis on the staff there. Roger Reyna was announced as the new head coach at Penn. Joe Russell is leaving George Mason to go to USA Wrestling. We've got 174, 184 breakdown, and then also taking a look at an interesting cross-country wrestling camp that's kind of popped on our radar here recently. David, where do you want to kick this thing off?
I want to kick it off with the Win Magazine Awards, because you won't if I don't. So I want to publicly congratulate you for being named the 2017 Win Magazine Journalist of the Year. I thought a lot about what I was going to say about this. First of all, obviously it's well-deserved, but it means a lot to me that you won. You've been really a mentor to me. I had no idea what I was doing when we started doing this. I just like to do rankings. And, you know, you've been very kind and very patient to me and with me. And I think it's just awesome and well-deserved. I also got permission from Sophie that for the rest of today's episode, I'm allowed to call you Bubba if I want to. I don't know what that means exactly, but she said if there's any problem that you have to take it up with her. So, but sincerely, a heartfelt congratulations, man. I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. And certainly, you know, I feel like the award is a great reflection of the entire team, yourself included. You've been a huge addition to our team at Track Wrestling, and I could go up and down the list of the guys that have played a huge role in getting this thing off the ground, and certainly our network of freelancers, you know, Travis Johnson, Greg Wallace, Roger Moore, Gary Blockus. Those guys were the ones doing the lion's share of the work on those conference notebooks throughout the season. Ben Visser, who did some intern work for us. Sam Phillips cut up a lot of highlights for us. You know, I'm sure I'm going to be leaving some people out, and I hate to do that. But you know, those are guys that chipped in, did a great job for us, as well as I'd be remiss if I didn't include Shane Sparks in that. Just some incredible interviews that he got throughout the year. And certainly, you know, the people in the wrestling world know the kind of energy that Shane Sparks brings to the Big Ten Network. And that's Shane Sparks 24/7, 365, 2 o'clock in the morning.
For sure.
3 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever hour of the day, that guy brings it. And so certainly, you know, I feel like I'm getting the credit here when it deserves to go to a lot of people, and thank you for that. So, you know,
one guy wins the award, though. It's just like all the guys that win nationals. They thank everybody, but at the end of the day, they had to go out and wrestle, and you had to go out and do your work and be the excellent journalist you are. So sincerely, congratulations, man.
Well, thank you. So enough about me. You know, lots of stuff, like we mentioned, coming down the pipe here in the last week. Certainly the IMAR situation, we've talked about that at length. You know, here the last couple of weeks. You know, what does the Mark Perry news mean for Isaiah Martinez? And you know, they've got such a tight bond there. But Isaiah's come out and said on a podcast here, the Inside Trip podcast. I want to give those guys credit for that. Sure. You know, they had him on, and Isaiah said to me, loyalty is a big deal. I would never transfer from Illinois. He goes, I could, if I graduated, I could transfer. I am on track to graduate with 2 degrees. By time I graduate next year, I wouldn't transfer. I have a job to finish with this university, and this university has my commitment. Loyalty is a big deal to me, and I would never leave my coaches here at this school. Surprised, David?
No. I talked to some people about this that spoke to me out of anonymity, and I knew for sure this was going to happen probably about 9 days ago. I was surprised then, but it doesn't really surprise me. And I think, we looked at the one relationship, but, obviously he's got relationships with a lot of people there. I mean, you've got the head coach, Coach Heffernan and Coach Hunter, his training partners, I don't know if he's got a girlfriend or any of those other kind of things, but I mean, there's a lot of things that obviously go into that decision-making process. And, I think it's a good move still for everybody. I think, Mark really well. I know Mark fairly well. I think it was a stressful relationship that was there. And so I think, maybe initially it won't be 100% positive. I think eventually it'll be good for Illinois. And obviously everybody's hoping it'll be good for Iowa. So, and the other thing that people don't think about is depending on what you major in, stuff doesn't always transfer. When I coached in junior college, it's a lot easier. College algebra is going to be college algebra no matter where you go. But when you start taking junior and senior level classes, certain schools have very specific classes. And if you have any sort of off the beat major, that would have an impact. And I had heard he was on track to graduate, which is great. But I'd also heard he wasn't going to graduate as of, earlier this month or as of this summer. So, he's got to be over 80%, but unless he graduated, he would need a release. And God only knows why Illinois would release him. I mean, they've scholarshiped this kid and given him an opportunity to be a winner. And, it makes sense that he stays, once you kind of have a bigger view of the whole picture.
Well, we might as well stick on the topic of college wrestling while we're on it. And I mentioned Trent Paulson headed to Virginia, going to join his twin brother Travis down there on Steve Garland's staff. Pretty cool that the Paulsons get to stick together, I think. Guys that spent, all but, one of their, 1 year in their life have spent in the state of Iowa. They went out to Nebraska, I think, for 1 year. And they were both, training out there for a little while. Came back, joined the staff at Iowa State. Travis lands the first job out there, and it's just kind of unique. Virginia goes from having no openings to having 2, and both of the Paulsons wind up getting to stick together. So I thought that was a pretty cool storyline. It's pretty interesting what Steve Garland's got going there, though. I mean, a couple guys in the semifinals this year. Jack Mueller coming back. George DiCamillo making it to the finals.
Right.
We've talked before in recent episodes about just what they've got in place. It feels like, Virginia's starting to take off a little bit.
Yeah, they've recruited really well, right? I mean, when we went through and did that top 20 preview, and I don't remember the exact quote you had, but you said these aren't just prospects. These are elite, top shelf. I don't want to misquote you, but, basically these are top-of-the-line high school kids, and, these are kids historically with those kind of credentials that make a big impact in college. I'm actually working on getting Cody Bickley from USA Wrestling on Mat Chat here in the next week or two, because I really want him to come on and talk about RTCs and, literally what RTCs can do and can't do, and what a coach can do on one of those and can, and how, how the rules are enforced so that people aren't breaking them. And a lot of people think, oh, well, this guy's going to go there and he can just do whatever he wants. And it's not the case. And RTCs are great for wrestling, but the NCAA works with USA Wrestling to enforce those. So those guys will have very distinct roles, one being on the RTC and one being on the collegiate coaching staff. And I think you'll see their styles, their mindset really impact that program, from the freshmen all the way to their, not just senior in college, but senior level guys. And, one of the Paulsons was a whisker away from making the Olympic team against Herbert in the last, at 2012 at the trials, correct?
Yeah, Travis was. I think it was Travis. You remember that goofy push out?
Yeah, where he jumped up in the air. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it didn't seem like it was possible that Herbert could have stepped out first, and sure enough, he did. That was one of the memories I have of that. But yeah, Travis and Trent, guys that like I mentioned, deep roots in the state of Iowa, and especially there in Ames, and good to see that they've landed on their feet and found a way to stick together. I know Trent told me last week that he was ready to cut the cord, so to speak, and go up to Wisconsin. It looked like he was going to take an opportunity up there with the regional training center up there, and this came along. So there's that. If you go a little bit further north, Penn. We talked about the Alex Tirapelli situation here a couple weeks ago, and found a little bit more out about that in the middle of last week when Roger Reyna was announced. He is returning to the head coaching post there at Penn. The Roger Reyna head coach of wrestling is now Roger Reyna himself. So, David, what do you think of the move there? I know in listening to or reading tweets, especially a guy like Brandon Slay, he wholeheartedly endorsed the move. What do you know about Roger Reyna? What do you think of the move?
Roger Reyna actually recruited me. That's, I went to Penn on a visit. So, I have a lot of respect for him. Old school guy. He's coached most of the national champions that have come out of Penn, and obviously was Slay's coach, who wasn't a national champion, but obviously went on to be an Olympic champion. So I have nothing but, good thoughts about Roger Reyna. I just still feel like Tirapelli that, I just feel like there were some things there that weren't right. That guy moved his, family, moved his life, did a lot of things like that. And I feel like Roger Reyna, I think he's 62 years old. He's not going to be the coach there for the next 15 years. So, we'll see what comes out of that. But, it definitely feels like, he's probably there, 2 to 5 years, maybe 6 years. Somebody else will take over, whether that's Brandon Slay because he's already going to be in that room, or whether they're going to do a national search. Just doesn't feel like they did a national search or anything like that. And so, I think it's good for the program. Obviously, brings when the coaching position is named after you, you have credibility. I don't know. I just feel bad for Tirapelli. That's all. It just kind of sticks in my craw.
Yep. Absolutely. Another big coaching situation that popped up here over the weekend, or Friday, I guess it was. Joe Russell, George Mason coach, is leaving to go to USA Wrestling, manager of freestyle programs. Joe Russell said in the release, or actually told USA Wrestling, Richard Immel, I feel blessed and honored to be chosen to assist the freestyle national team as a passionate advocate for wrestling. From before I could even walk, this honor and responsibility given to me is breathtaking. During his time there, Russell led George Mason to 41 dual meet victories, coached 6 wrestlers to 8 berths at the NCAA championships. It's really interesting to see how that role evolves out there. And also, who winds up at George Mason.
Right.
Just your general thoughts on that move there.
Well, it's interesting because I just interviewed Gary Mayab for Matt Chat. He'll come out on Friday, but he has the same role in the Greco program. So for people that don't know Gary Mayab, he's one of the most organized human beings in the world. So it was really interesting. He broke down what they're going to do and everything else. And people don't remember Joe Russell wrestling. A lot of them don't. That dude was a bad dude and really high-level technique, really smart guy. So it feels like a really good fit for USA Wrestling. Obviously, they went out and got their guy. And, we talked about they still need to fill the position that Metcalf left. So, we're going to see at least one more change there at USA Wrestling. I'm really happy for Joe Russell. I mean, people that don't know his story, he's overcome hardship to stay in the sport of wrestling and be a really valuable, productive member of it. So, nothing but good thoughts and wishes towards him, and I think it's a great get for USA Wrestling overall.
Also, in the news the past week, the rumors surfacing about Joey McKenna possibly leaving Stanford. Gavin Hoffman committing to Ohio State. So Ohio State gets two of the top 17 recruits now on the Intermat, top 100, or actually top 50 list of the class of 2018. Hoffman at number 17, going along with number 13, Jaden Maddox. So Maddox a middleweight, Hoffman stepping in at potentially 84, 97, somewhere in there. Certainly a good gift for Ohio State, and also a good situation for Gavin Hoffman stepping into that room where you got Kyle Snyder, Colin Moore, Miles Martin, Bo Jordan, possibly sticking around to train as well.
Sure.
So good gift for Ohio State. Also kind of goes to show that Penn State's not going to get everybody in the top 20 on that list for 2018. So for Ohio State going to Pennsylvania, get a pretty good one, a couple-time state champ, good gift for the Buckeyes.
For sure. And, we talked about last week doing Ohio border brawl. So, I pay attention even more now to, the Ohio seniors to be and Pennsylvania seniors to be and Michigan and Indiana and West Virginia and those states. So, but yeah, I had heard that he was going to go there. I'm like, if this kid announces he's going to Penn State, we'll either have an hour podcast about that or we'll just give up. So it certainly keeps things interesting. And, I think you'd mentioned McKenna too, right? Right before that, about maybe he might end up somewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
What's really interesting if you look at him is, some of the programs that people are talking about him going to, but people, I don't think people understand that schools have no money right now for this year. I mean, they have money set aside, but it's for the class of 18, or they might not even have money set aside. They just know guys are going to graduate this year. Like, to use an example, Gavin Hoffman is, probably getting money that's coming free when Nathan Tomasello, Bo Jordan, and Kyle Snyder graduate. I mean, obviously people are smart enough to figure that out, but you generally, if you're a really good team, you don't have just, half to three-quarter scholarships just laying around in basically June 1, just hoping a superstar shakes out. So, and then you combine that with a lot of the really good teams that don't have huge needs at 141 or 149. It's going to be interesting. I mean, we talked about Pat Lugo last week too. It wouldn't shock me if both those guys ended up staying where they are. I'm not saying they will. It doesn't shock me. I mean, kids get upset, stuff gets said. I mean, I talked to a coach and he goes, how many guys would transfer if just every time, somebody had a cross word with them, they left? He goes, that's part of coaching. So, I'll be interested to see what happens. I mean, I understand that when there's smoke, there's fire. So I do believe that could happen. But, to me, the one that makes the most sense if they have the money is Lehigh because of his relationship with Coach Buxton. But again, you talk about the RTC rules versus being on the staff rules, and those are not the same thing. People think they're the same, but they're not. So, yeah. So it'd be interesting to see how it shakes out for sure.
Yeah, and I certainly don't know his academic situation, but he's in year 2, wrapping up year 2 out there, and Stanford education being halfway to potentially halfway to graduating out there. That to me would be pretty hard to walk away from. The possibility of getting a Stanford degree. But that being said, you look at wrestling goals, and these are guys that are deeply invested in the sport, and have invested decades, a decade or a decade and a half into chasing these dreams. And so, but I'm with you. I think that you look at where they might wind up, and there aren't a lot of programs with huge pressing needs at there. I know Joey McKenna had spent some time in Iowa City, I want to say 2 summers ago, a little bit maybe, when he was out rolling around with some guys, with Hawkeye Wrestling Club guys there for a little bit. But you mentioned, the potential list there. What do we hear? Penn State, Ohio State, Iowa, Lehigh. But that being said, that's going to be interesting. I know the point you make about scholarship money at this stage in the game. I think back to a year ago, and one of the problems for Iowa State a year ago was when Earl Hall out of nowhere got that
6th year. Yeah.
6th year of eligibility, and suddenly, they got to figure out a way to
help them,
have some funds to help them. And I remember Kevin Jackson talking about that being a little bit of a challenge at the time, just because they usually had tried to set aside some money for guys that had performed well academically, guys that had performed well on the mat. So maybe some programs have a little bit of that floating around still, but to your point, I don't think that, there are a lot of coaches that are banking on a high caliber transfer being available at this stage of the game.
Yeah, and a couple things there. First of all, you're right about McKenna rolling around in Iowa, but McKenna's been on world teams. He wrestled for Blair.
Yep.
I mean, that kid. You go through his, Twitter account or Instagram or cell phone or whatever it is. He has connections to everybody in probably the top 30 in the country. So and probably positive connections. So everything you hear, he's a really nice kid. So there's no reason to think, he doesn't have a network at this age. So, that's really important for people to realize. He could go anywhere. And all the points you make about, like the point about Kevin Jackson, what he said, that's really true. I know a ton of kids that went to Missouri because I'm here and I know a lot of them. And they went on next to nothing to begin with. Brian Smith is as good as anybody in the country in rewarding guys for winning, for making the academic all SEC or, Big 12 team back then, or, making the starting lineup, or becoming an All-American, or becoming a national champion. And so, that's, you recruit a guy, maybe, you recruit me on 10 or 15%, and then I end up doing these other things, and now I'm at 40 or 50. And you have to reward those. I guess you don't have to, but if you reward one, you got to reward all of them. And I think that's what's so astounding about the success Penn State's having recruiting, because these kids, you get them all on potential to begin with, so, and then what happens when they actually are as good as you thought they were? Then, do you give them more? Are they on a flat rate over there? So I just don't know. I agree with you, too. And the thing I think about when Joey McKenna went to Stanford is what's changed, right? It's not like when you go to Stanford, we talked about the University of Pennsylvania, right before that, you're not going to have the same amount of workout partners as if you go to Penn State, Ohio State, Oklahoma State, Minnesota, these traditional powers that are always in the top 5, 10 in the country. And if like Jamil had left, or, Borelli left, or somebody like that left, you're like, okay, well, I get it. Like maybe he rolled with Jamil 3 days a week or something. But nothing's really changed there. Obviously he's had great regular seasons and hasn't had the success he wants at the national tournament, but, the paradigm, the structure that he agreed to commit to hasn't really changed. So it makes you wonder, people only leave because something gets worse. If everything's great, you don't leave. That's whether it's a friendship or a relationship or a college. If everything's cool, you stay where you are because it's cool. So, kind of on the outside looking in, nothing's changed. Obviously, something has, or at least his perception of it has, if he's serious about leaving. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes and, in his mind, what the perception is of what changed.
David, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but Mike Krause contacted me a couple days ago, and we were talking about this camp that he's got set up that's sounds pretty cool. Battle the Bus. You can check this out if you search battlethebus.com. It says explains what this is, but Mike Krause out of Michigan there has got a 21-day bus trip set up and there's still some openings on this for people who are interested. They're going to go 21 days cross country, starting at the University of Michigan on July 24th, going through Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado. They're going to stop at the Olympic Training Center. They're going to go to Vegas. They're going to go to Stanford. They're going to travel throughout Northern California, up to Oregon and Washington, back through Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, and then getting back to Detroit on August 15th. 15 states, 18 clinics, 21 days. The flyer describes it as a lifetime of experiences. Sounds like a pretty cool trip to me. David, going back to your experiences, do you have any camps or clinics, back in the day that stood out, that were memorable to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, my dad obviously was a college coach, and he would just open up his room in the summertime, and really, guys that came back home could wrestle. I mean, I was, 12 years old wrestling with college guys. I'm sure they were going super easy on me, but the two main clinics, and, my dad's the most humble guy in the world. He acts like he doesn't know anybody, but he got Dan Gable to come to Merrimack and do a seminar or a clinic, which was awesome. And I think he did it in the 70s, so not real long after he won. I mean, I remember being a little kid. And then he had Sergei Beloglazov in, who, if people don't know who Sergei Beloglazov is, literally is the Russian hammer. And sometimes when you're at a clinic, you end up being the drill partner, right? So I was Sergei Beloglazov's drill partner. And, a lot of, seminars, or clinics, whatever you want to call it, they teach certain things. And then at the end, there's some Q&A, right? And, what do you want to learn, this and that? And I remember this vividly because I couldn't walk for like a week afterwards. Somebody said, well, you just do freestyle. Are you getting any good on top with anything besides leg lace and gut wrenches? And he goes, well, what? And he goes, like leg riding. He goes, leg riding's easy. He just put in one leg, and I don't know what he did next because I was underneath it. But my spine bent in half. I was on my back and didn't walk right for a week. And he goes, see, leg riding is easy. So that left a very memorable impression. And when I was in college as a freshman, I was actually Mark Perry Sr.'s drill partner for a clinic. So I've been blessed to have some really good guys beat the hell out of me. So this thing Mike Krause is doing, I don't know what the cost is, but it's really, I mean, I'm assuming if I understand correctly, like they go to Legends of Gold and whoever's there teaches. They go to Nebraska and Mark Manning and that staff teaches. Is that the concept of the deal?
That's my understanding. We're gonna get Mike Krause on, and maybe we can get him on this podcast here in the next week or two. But we're gonna get him on a podcast on Track Wrestling to talk about this. But I don't know that they necessarily go to the University of Nebraska. I know they got a day set up on the schedule for Nebraska Kearney. So, and as I mentioned, Legends of Gold.
Yeah. Our guy Terry Pack, right? Yeah. Yep.
So we're going to get him on. Hopefully we can get him on this podcast, maybe just to talk about it here in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, it sounds like a once in a lifetime opportunity for some of these kids. I know. I want to say the cost is like $3,400, somewhere along those lines. It's got a frequently asked questions section here. Yeah, $3,477. Covers housing, meals, gear, clinician fees, and entertainment, theme parks, movies, sporting events, etc. So
doesn't sound like the worst deal in the world, And I mean, you get your profile as a kid, you get to be seen by a lot of schools, and it's the other thing. It's almost like test driving a car, or going to demo days at a golf course where you get to hit 8 different drivers right in a row, and you actually figure out which one's the best for you. I mean, you get to meet all these coaches, and you kind of figure out which program's the right fit for you, right?
Yep. And it's a in talking to Mike, it's a deal that's available to kids of all ages. And so, for college, kids that are out there wanting to check out college programs, as well as, guys that are in, junior high maybe, that are just trying to brush up their skills and develop their skill sets, and getting to a lot of different campuses and learning a lot of different things. Sounds pretty cool to me.
It's right after Fargo too, right? So, probably not going to be a ton of, live goes and stuff like that. It's really going to be learning and probably be, I would think, slightly more relaxed. And, in coaching, you talk all the time about learning phases and training phases, and it feels like that camp will be one gigantically awesome learning phase. So that'd be cool if you could have him on. I'm actually have some questions I'd like to ask him. And I think, I love anybody that's trying to do something new and visionary in wrestling,
Absolutely.
I'm trying to do a few small things and, trying to push the envelope for the betterment of the sport. And so, you can have nothing but respect for guys that are trying to do stuff like that for sure.
Anything else you want to get to before we go to breakdown of what's coming back at 74 and 84?
No, let's dig in. You ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so 74, we talked about how ridiculous some of these weights are. If you're looking for how it's not ridiculous, there's only 5 returning All-Americans. Here's where it is ridiculous. The top 4 guys are back, and literally 32 national qualifiers are back. So, top 4, Mark Hall, Bo Jordan, Zahid Valencia, Miles Amin, although Zahid may move up, as we've talked about numerous times. And somebody told me that Zahid is actually 2-0. Granted, it's freestyle, but he's 2-0 against Bo Nickel. So it's not like he'd be scared to do that by any stretch. Then you're round to 12 guys, Zach Epperly, Virginia Tech, Ryan Priest, Lehigh, Jaden Bernstein, Navy. Your round of 16 guys are all back. Taylor Lujan, Northern Iowa, Trace Engelkes, Northern Illinois, Christian Bruckey, Central Michigan, who actually has a win over Hall, Ryan Christensen, Wisconsin. And then round of 24, you have Ethan Ramos, who was an All-American in 2015, Jonathan Schleifer from Princeton, Joseph Johnson, Harvard, Connor Bass, Duke, Ty Shopstall from Edinburgh, who I know we both like, Jordan Pagano, Rutgers. Then you're round to 32 guys, David Koser, Devin Scatza, Matt Reed, who was around to 33, but really he got injured in the Big 12 finals against Crutchmer, Austin Trott, Nick Reenan, Chris Farr, Jacob Morrissey. And then you got some really tough guys that are either coming out of redshirt, guys like Caleb Young, Iowa, Bo Bresky, Nebraska, Fox Baldwin, Virginia are all freshmen. Xavier Montalvo, who sat last year behind Brunson at Illinois. And then you have Jacoby Smith, who's a 2-time JUCO champ who redshirted last year at Okie State, who pinned Brunson at the Lindenwood Open last season. So this weight is loaded. When you look at this weight, what are the first couple thoughts that pop into your head, Andy?
Well, you mentioned Epperly's name, and he decided to forego his last year of eligibility. He's not going to wrestle at Virginia Tech next year, but that takes one of the big-time contenders out of this weight class. But that being said, I mean, look at the top 4, top 3, especially Hall, Jordan, Valencia. Tremendous talent at the top of this weight class. And then going down to some of these guys, Priest, we saw him, post some big wins this year. Going down a little further, Lujan, we saw flashes from him, just a guy that's really difficult to wrestle. It appears to be. I mean, some of the scramble skills that he has, super dangerous. So it feels to me like, while there are some other weights, that we've looked at here in recent weeks, 65, for example, a little bit more top heavy.
Right.
But that being said, I think 74 is going to be a lot of fun, seeing the movement from, 5'6" on down to about 15 throughout the year, because I think that there's going to be a lot of parity in that. And as you mentioned, Jacoby Smith, Caleb Young, Bo Bresky, Montalvo, Fox Baldwin. It seems like Fox Baldwin, when whenever I've watched him in a freestyle match, there've been like 20 points on the board, and things could get a little bit wild in some Fox Baldwin matches. He's going to be a lot of fun to watch next year. And Reenan, Nick Reenan, coming out at 74 as a true freshman, tall task that he went through this year, but I think we're going to see some North Carolina State guys make a move next year. We saw that they were really strong at 10 weights and some depth at several of those weights. But a better dual team than individual tournament team. I think that some individuals for North Carolina State are going to be moving up that ladder next year and make them a better tournament team.
For sure. I need to correct myself. There's not 32 returning guys. There's 24. We just ranked 25 deep, and I saw, qualifiers in the first 24 boxes and got that confused with 33. But, so there's 24 qualifiers back, and then, guys like Caleb Young, who wrestled really well at the Junior World Team Trials. And I know Mark Manning's high on Bresky. I know Illinois is high on Montalvo. And, Jacoby Smith that kid is the truth. He's awfully talented. And, I heard he was doing really well, with Crutchmer in that room. So, that bodes well for them as well. Because, they got a good lineup. They just, they got a couple holes. And if he can wrestle the way, you think he can, then that would make a big difference as well, obviously.
Yep.
Yeah. So we go to 184, and you've got Bo Nickel at 1. Miles Martin goes at 2. And it's interesting. We'll talk about this next week, but Ohio State is ranked first or second in the last 4 weight classes with Bo Jordan, Miles Martin, Colin Moore, Kyle Snyder. So, and I want to look this up. Yeah. And obviously they've got Tomasello ranked, so he'd be ranked number 2 at either 25 or 33. So they're going to have 5 top 2 ranked guys, plus Micah Jordan's going to be ranked in the top 4. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to look this up. What's the highest point total ever for a team that didn't win nationals? Because I think that record could get broke this year. So it'll be interesting to see. But anyway, so Miles Martin is second. Drew Foster is third. Pete Renda, who was 4th last year, or in 2016 is 4th. Willie Nicklaus was 6'6" and got injured, so I have him at 5th. Although the rumor is he may go to 97, that he's really big, so I don't know. But for now, I have him at 84 in the much too early rankings. Then Dominic Abinader coming off a red shirt for Michigan. Then round of 12 guys, Emery Parker, who had some really good wins, Nick Gravina. Then round of 16 guys, Dakota Gear, Jordan Ellingwood, Hunter Gamble, Michael Coleman. Round of 24 guys, you got Zach Zabasky, Bryce Carr, Steve Schneider, Nick Korba, Dylan Gable, Hunter Ritter, Mitch Sliga, and Joe Hiob. And then round of 32s, Alex DeCiantis, Bobby Stevenson, Michael Fag-Davies, Villahino, Christian Lafregola, and Garrett Hoffman. And then you've got some really tough freshmen. You got Chris Weiler from Lehigh, Max Dean from Cornell. And I guess, and you probably know this, if Darmstadt's going to probably go 97, but it'll be one of those guys there. Greg Bolsack Clarion, and then Andrew Marsden from Oklahoma State, who's sitting in the finals of the Junior World Team Trials. So again, another weight where, none of these weights are, it's crazy how, none of them you're like, well, somebody could sneak in and, make the finals you've never heard of before. It just doesn't feel like that again.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And to rewind to your question, I want to say I'm almost positive here that Iowa in 2001 scored 125.5 points and finished runner-up to Minnesota. And that's an Iowa team that had Strip Matter Juergens, Schwab, Zadek, T.J. Williams in the first 5 weight classes, second, first, second, third, first. And certainly a top-heavy lineup there. They didn't get a whole lot of production out of 65 through heavyweight, but that was a team that scored 125.5 and finished second to Minnesota, which won it with 138.5 the year Minnesota had 10 All-Americans. None in the finals, but 10 All-Americans Only time that's been done. So I'm with you there that, Ohio State certainly could take a run at that Iowa mark. You look at the points that they're going to score from those 5 weights that you mentioned, and then factor in Micah Jordan, what they're going to get at 65, Keyshawn Campbell, potentially from Dayton Racer at 157. However the pieces. Yep. However the pieces align at 33 and 41, 25, 33, 41, they're going to score a lot of points, 1 through 10 next year. But absolutely, that Penn State bar is out there a ways, and it's going to take a heck of an effort from Ohio State or anybody else for that matter to track down Penn State a year from now. Willie Nicklaus, you mentioned him, the potential of him going up to 197, and one of the things that's interesting about Willie Nicklaus, we saw him first dual meet of the season, or not first dual meet, but one of the first dual meets of the season. Blew out his knee there against Virginia Tech in the match against Zavatsky, and never returned the rest of the year. But Brian Smith has told me a while back that they're pretty optimistic that Willie Nicklaus is going to get an extra year of eligibility because of injuries he sustained early in his year. So to have Willie Nicklaus back for a couple years is quite a deal for Missouri, as well as Willie to have a chance to potentially grow into 197 if that's where he goes. It's interesting that he's at 184. He spent the first 2 years of his career at 184 because his senior year of high school, he was wrestling 220 in Iowa and actually wrestled some heavyweight matches his senior year of high school. And so looking at him back when he was competing at Southeast Polk, I thought just looking at the size of his feet and hands and his frame, I thought, this guy that could potentially wrestle heavyweight in college, and then they get Jaden Cox, and Jaden spends his career there at 97, and so Willie has to go down to 84. But that to me would be a pretty good fit for Willie Nicklaus if he does indeed go up to 97. And otherwise, just taking a look at this, I think it's going to be interesting to see Miles Martin, Bo Nickel showdowns, for the next couple of years if we see those showdowns continue, and then Pat Downey. We've talked a lot about him in recent weeks. The wild card that is Pat Downey. Where is he going to land, and what weight will he be at? Certainly, if he's on a college roster next year, whether he's at 84 or 97, he's going to be in the mix to compete for a title.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of rules there about going 4-2, 4-4, and all that kind of stuff. So, it'll be interesting. But, I mean, the other thing that we kind of glossed on it, but if the Heat goes up to 184, he has to almost be considered a co-favorite almost right away. I mean, because he's, I don't know if he's ever lost to Miles Martin or Bo Nickel. So, I mean, that really, really spices that weight up. And, I talked to some people I trust out there, and they're kind of undecided what they're going to do, but you pointed this out all during the season. The Heat wrestled up for a lot of the dual meets just to make Arizona State stronger to the team. And that was when he was, he had to weigh in at 174. So, clearly, I mean, granted, he wasn't wrestling the best guys in the country at 84, but clearly that size was not a problem for him against, probably some normal, average, middle-of-the-road guys. So that weight's going to be really interesting for sure.
Yeah, and just looking at this list, Emory Parker, Illinois makes a huge jump last year. Minute away from the semifinals and looked like he was going to take Sam Brooks down, potentially to his back, gets rolled through and stuck there in the third period and loses in the round of 12. But, he was one of the guys that made a huge leap this past season. So did Drew Foster from Northern Iowa. I mean, you rewind to November, and there was talk whether Drew Foster would even be Northern Iowa's starter. Him and Jacob Holschlag were in a battle there for the 184 job, and Foster won it, had a terrific season. Just looking ahead with the possibility of him starting the season out ranked third, Northern Iowa's got a squad that could really make a move next year. I know Doug Schwab's excited about the squad that he has coming back. Looking at Max Thompson Bryce Steyert and Foster and plugging Rudy Yates into that lineup somewhere, plugging Carter Isley in at heavyweight. Northern Iowa's a squad that could really make a move, I think, next year and jump up into, potentially back into the top 10.
Yeah, and Holzschlag, once he knew he was going 97, started to have some good wins at the end of the year. And like I told you, we talked to him at Nationals, and that he knows he's just going to go lift and get big. And so, you have to think that can only bode well for him in the future too. So, yep. Yeah, you and I is going to be scrappy next year for sure.
So we'll talk about Jacob Holzschlag next week when we get to 197 in heavyweight. Anything else you want to hit this week, David?
No, but congratulations once again, Andy. I know we won't talk about this for a year, and you would, probably didn't want to talk about it today, but, I'm happy for you and proud of you, and I'm happy for track wrestling, and you can be Batman and I'll be Robin any day of the week, man. So.
Well, hey, while we got you, you mentioned Gary Mayab coming up this week on Matt Chat. Do you have any others that you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, we're going to do Gary Mayab's interview we did last week, so it'll come out Friday. Rich Bender's out now, and it's a great listen. He knows so many guys and gals and so many stories. It's really an easy listen. I'm working on getting Cody Bickley to talk about the RTCs right in time for the World Team Trials, and then I'm going to do something a little different the next 2 weeks. I'm going to do my best to get all 8 of the World Team Trial winners on for like 15 or 20 minutes and kind of combine 3 or 4 of them into an hour podcast, for the following 2 weeks. And then I got some other people lined up for late June and July that I think people will find really interesting. So, this is the time to kind of play around with format, because once we get to, definitely in October, November, we're going to go stick with our bread and butter and go back to those assistant coaches to talk about the college season, because, that's where I started, and I think that was pretty well received.
For sure. So check that out on Track Wrestling. We'll be back next week to break down, I'm sure we're going to break down 97 in heavyweight, but also take a look at World Team Trials, or some other stuff I'm sure that will happen in the college wrestling world. The news never stops now, 52 weeks a year, and so are we. So check back to Track Wrestling if you want to download and listen on the go, or check back to the previous 39 episodes of Weighing In. You can do that on iTunes through the Matt Talk Podcast Network, as well as all of the past episodes of Matt Chat are on there. Great stuff that David has done. And I'd also encourage you to check out one of the new programs that we have. We just started it here in week 3 now, coming up on week 4. The Blue Chip Recruiting Podcast with Eric Olenowski. He's had Gable Stevenson, Spencer Lee on in the first 2 weeks. He had Alex Thompson, the recent Nebraska commit. Great stuff from Eric. He's going to be having some more high-profile guests on in the weeks to come. And so I'd encourage you to check all that stuff out. But, David, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.